Good morning and welcome everyone. Welcome back to another virtual science camp. And here for the first time, I have a guest host, Mr. T. So let's all welcome Mr. T for this one on making a homemade Newtonmeter, which we're going to go over making and calibrating for Friday's session on measuring coefficient of friction with it. So welcome again, Mr. T, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for the warm welcome, and hello, everybody. So today is your chance to make and calibrate a Newtonmeter. If you haven't yet made something, then this is the opportunity to think about how to do it and hopefully finish one. Can we have some kind of feedback, Michael, on the progress in that respect?
So to get a reaction, first of all, can you put a thumbs up if you gathered the materials that you were recommended to get so that you can make this? Whether or not you tried making it already, if you have a transparent pen, an elastic, and a paper clip. Okay, so we're getting some thumbs up. It's looking good. Hopefully we'll see a couple more thumbs up. So if you have the materials, put your thumb up again so I can see it. Okay, and we're not getting many reactions. We're getting a couple of reactions. And I just want to remind everyone that these virtual camps, these are designed for you guys to follow along with materials at home. And I give the example sometimes, it's kind of like if you're going to a restaurant and if you're not eating, you can still go into the restaurant and you can watch other people eat, but it might be boring and frustrating. And also for the people who are eating, if they're surrounded by a lot of people watching them eat, it could feel kind of awkward. So I want to remind you, you're not getting the full experience out of this if you're not bothering to grab equipment. You'll probably be bored and you might make some of the people feel awkward. So someone doesn't have a paper clip at home, so we'll go over troubleshooting things you could use instead. If you don't have a paper clip, we can probably think of other things you could use as a hook. I'll take a moment to think of some alternatives. Some of the comments that came up when people were signing up were that you couldn't find a transparent pen. I've made a Newtonmeter using a straw that I suggested instead. Someone mentioned having a hard time finding elastics. If you couldn't find an elastic, one of the suggestions was opening up like a click pen and getting the spring out of there. So those are two suggestions so far. Also, just a reminder, it'd be great if anyone feels like turning on their video to show what you're making. This session is being recorded, but I'll be editing and cropping it, so you won't appear in it, nor will your names. Only Mr. T and I will appear. So if anyone has equipment they want to show us or wants to just show your face to say hi, that'd be great if you could show that. You won't be in the published video afterwards, so please do feel free to share your camera or share things like that. Are there any questions up to this point? Does anyone have a suggestion for an alternative for paper clips, for anyone who's following along who has everything but a paper clip? I'm surprised I haven't yet thought of something. Yes, Mr. T.
Perhaps you could use a piece of copper wire or something like that from a cable.
Oh, that's excellent, yeah.
A thick one, not too thin, but quite thick.
That's a great idea, yeah. So that could work really well. And anything that you could either use as a hook or bend as a hook. Perfect. So maybe with those explanations out of the way, we'll turn it over to you again, Mr. T, to talk us through how to put this together.
Okay, so those of you who watched the video will have seen all of this, but I'm going to explain it in perhaps slightly different way. So maybe you will get a better idea of any mistakes you might have made during the making process. Okay, so that's what you start with, some kind of transparent tube. Okay, you also need the elastic band, quite long, so longer than the tube. So when you cut the band with your scissors, should be about 4 centimeters longer than the tube. Okay. Now the reason for that is that you're going to tie some knots. A knot is when you do this. Yes. Okay. And you're going to tie 2 or 3 knots in this elastic band. So it needs to be longer than the pen. because the elastic band is going to be inside the pen. Okay, so the next step, if you didn't see the video, is to take the inside of the pen and to cut off the top of the pen. Okay, I'm not going to do it because I like my pen. I've already done it in this example. Okay, you can see the top from my pen has been cut and put here. All right. Next step, tie the elastic band to the pen. Okay. Now, in your case, you will have already cut this. Yeah? I haven't cut it because I like my pen at the moment. I want to keep it. Now, you do a double knot. Okay, it's important to do a double knot. So I'll repeat the knotting process for those of you who don't tie knots all the time. You make a loop, you pass the end, you make a loop, you pass the end through the loop, okay? And that makes the first part of the knot. And then you do it a second time. You make another loop and you pass the end through the loop and you tie it. So that's a double knot, all right? You must do double knots. So we're going to go back to pen. There we go. And I've done my first knot here. I'm going to do a second knot like that. In fact, for safety, I'm going to do a third knot. You'll see why in a minute. All right. Okay, so that's the plastic from the inside of the pen tied to the elastic band. The next step is to hang the band next to the pen like this and just have a look at the length. Okay, it doesn't need to be so long. You can cut it 2 centimeters now because you've already done one knot at the top. Remember, that's finished. So you can tie another knot using about 2 or 3 centimeters at the bottom here. Okay, so I'm going to cut that band again. Okay, so now I have my first part and my tube with my extra elastic at the bottom. Okay, now before we put the elastic in the tube, we're going to put the elastic in the tube shortly. We're going to mark the elastic band about, I would say, 2 centimeters from the top, something like that. Maybe even less. Okay, so I'm going to mark my band with a marker. Try not to do like me. I've made a big mark. Try and make a little mark so it's not too big, because you want it to be a spot, really, not a big line, just a spot on the elastic band. There we go. So I can try and show you what I've done there. That's a bit big. You really want just a mark, a small mark, because you're going to use that as your pointer. And now the magic part, you put the elastic band down inside the tube. So you feed it down inside the tube like that. Okay, and you go all the way down, down until it comes out the bottom. Remember, you will have cut this. I didn't cut mine. And then you see the elastic's coming out the bottom. You just pull that, take a paper clip or a piece of copper wire, something similar. Just open it a little bit with your hands to make a hook, okay, because you're going to hook things after. Pass the elastic band through the paper clip, and when it's finished, the elastic band should be just outside, but I suggest at the moment you tie it right next to the, you can stretch the band a little bit and tie the hook next to the exit of the tube. And again, double knot. Can you think why we do double knots? I'm going to do a triple knot for safety. Okay. Up. It's good practice for knots, this. There we go. Okay. Now, this part was not mentioned on the video, but it's quite important. So just to look, you can see that as I pull the hook, the marker goes down on the Newtonmeter. Okay, so that's going to be how it works. Now, it's important to pull quite hard. So I recommend you stretch the elastic to double the length. The reason is that the knot here at the top must be tight. And if it's not tight, it will start to stretch and change the position of your marker inside your Newtometer. So just make sure that you've pulled that nice and tight. I would say pull an extra length of elastic, not breaking it, but just one extra length to make sure the knot is gone down inside the top of the pen here. Okay, you see my knot has gone down inside the pen. Okay, so mine looks like this.
Clarification for everyone doing that. Is it best if they're holding the paper clip so it ties the other knot, or if they hold the elastic band when pulling?
Sorry, I didn't really catch that.
Well, you see here, I'm pulling from the elastic band, so it's pulling on this knot versus just pulling the band.
Ah, I see. Good point.
Does it matter if this one gets tight yet, or we'll worry about
I think
that
the bottom one should be tight too. So you might want to do something like grab the end here and pull that too to make sure that one's tight. That's a good point. Thank you, Mr. G.
Perfect. And also, I'd like to remind everyone following along, if you have any questions, please feel free to stop us, or either in the chat or from your microphone, ask any questions you're having while we're doing this, because we're trying to make a point of going at a speed that you can follow this along, and we're here to answer your questions and to help out with it. So some feedback would be great. Also, just in terms of reactions, can anyone give a thumbs up if you've managed to make it up to this point, either following along beforehand or doing it now? So thumbs up, or even better if you can actually show it. Excellent, I'm seeing one thumbs up. And can you hold that up so we can see it as well?
Great.
Beautiful, that's looking great. We're seeing someone else hoping to show it. Kind of see it there. Okay, so we know we have at least a couple of people who have made it successfully up to this point, and seeing theirs is also giving anyone who's a little bit slower a little bit of a chance to catch up. So hopefully there are other people who are either just camera shy or maybe who don't have the bandwidth to share their camera who are also making it as well. Thank you guys for showing it. If you feel like turning your camera off again, feel free, but feel free to turn it on or leave it on anytime you want. Okay, I think unless anyone tells us to slow down, then we can move on. I think, Mr. T, you were ready to talk about calibration soon.
So you've got this device. You've all become engineers. Huh? We should really say why we're doing this exercise is to make an instrument for measuring. Scientists do a lot of measuring, but they use equipment they buy very often, and they don't make it themselves. But you guys are making your own measuring tools. So you're actually engineers, okay? You're scientists, but you're also engineers because you're making something, some technology to measure with. So, okay, this is the one I made earlier, which I prefer because it's got the little spot on the elastic band, which is better. And you can see, can I measure something with this? Well, not really, because all measuring tools have a scale, don't they? I mean, this is a ruler, and it's got a measuring scale on it. And anything you use to measure has a measuring scale. So our Newtonmeter does not yet have a scale. So how do we make a scale? How do we calibrate this instrument? You can say, oh, this is a strong force, this is a weak force, because I'm pulling less, but you cannot tell me exactly what the force is, okay? But after this calibration, we're going to be able to say approximately what the force is on the device. Okay. Now the best way to do this is either to take a piece of paper with a post-it with a sticky side and stick it behind your Newtonmeter. So I use this post-it like this. You can use some what you call that stuff. I think I've got some here. Let me see if I can find it. You can use some Yoo-hoo type, maybe glue, this type of stuff. Stick a piece of paper behind your Newtonmeter. The important thing is the mark has to be near the top of the paper, okay? That's going to be your 0. Okay, so place or stick the paper behind your pen. I know some of you have gone looking for glue, other people have perhaps got Post-its. If not, there is actually, did we provide the scale, Mr. G?
We did for anyone who has a printer. Myself, I don't have a printer, so I'm going the Post-it method.
Right.
Also, tape can be handy if you don't have glue, or like if you only have glue that takes a long time to dry. Or if you have masking tape, that'd be awesome. But anything that you can have that sticks on the side of the straw.
Okay. So the important thing is you can see the spot. Okay, that's really important to see the spot. Once you've done that, well, you can take a pencil and you can mark a little 0 next to that. Because I'm going to do that right now. I'll take my pencil. Best to use a pencil, I think, in case you make some mistakes. And I'm just going to mark next to my black spot here a little 0 on my paper. Yeah. Okay. So I don't know if you can see that. It's not very easy to see, and it's not exactly in the right place, but it's not bad. Okay, that's my 0. Okay, I can see people getting some paper and sticking it to their pen. And you need to mark a 0 on that piece of paper. Okay, now we provided, I think, a scale, and the scale will not be necessarily the one for your Newtonmeter. So I would suggest you take the scale which is blank if you printed the document. Okay, those of you who are just using blank paper like me, that's fine. You just stick it on and mark the 0. Okay, 0. 0. That's better. All right, now the next step, after you've got the 0 marked on the paper, is to find another mark. Now, to do that, you can hang something very light that's not going to make a force on the paper, like an elastic, a plastic bag, a small Ziploc bag. I don't actually have a Ziploc bag, so I made myself a little basket. This is plastic, it's very light, it almost weighs nothing, and it doesn't really affect my 0 mark here. Okay, so I hang my basket. I'm just going to reposition my 0. Yeah, that's better. In fact, there's some diffraction, refraction happening on my, can you see the refraction happening? It's making my 0 look at a different place. Can you see that, Mr. G?
Oh, yeah, that's just from a refraction, so it's not
just refraction. When I turn it like this, look, it goes underneath.
Oh, yeah.
It's changing position. As I bend it, the position changes. It's not the elastic changing, it's the light going through the pen. It's being refracted. Anyway.
Okay, so if that's happening for people at home, it's important to know you probably want to take your reading straight on, like from directly in front rather than from below or from above.
Hold it, like that. Yeah, exactly.
And mine that I'm using just a drinking straw to show that you can use it, there's not that much of a problem because the plastic is so much thinner than for a pen.
Right. So as we said to people who have just started looking, we're going to hang something very light on here so we can put weights inside, some mass inside. I made a little basket. It took me some time. You don't have time to do that. I suggest a little plastic bag. If you can find a tiny plastic bag in which you can put things, make a little hole in the top, or just push this clip through the elastic bag. I don't know if you have one to hand, Mr. G, but I don't actually have a plastic bag to show what I'm trying to say. But there we go. Yeah, exactly. Can you bring it a little?
North American nature, I always tend to have bags like this around. They're not as common in France.
Can you bring it nearer to the camera so they can see how it's connected at the top?
Oh, so all I did, I put a hole in the bag, which isn't great for reusing the bag afterwards, and it's just hanging from the top. So now I'm ready to load things into it and see where it goes down on my scale.
Okay, so the next thing is to find some masses something we know the mass of and we have a lot of. So we need lots of things of the same mass if possible, so we can fill up little by little the basket. So I found these. These are just screws, which are about 10 grams. I know these are 10 grams because I've weighed them. Okay, it's not possible for you necessarily to weigh at home. So what you can use is a rectangular sugar lump. I'll show you one. Like that. Okay, you can use sugar lump. They're about 10 grams, approximately 10 grams. So if you take sugar lumps, you can put them in the bag. When you put them in the bag or the basket, you'll notice that the Newtonmeter will drop. Okay, the mark goes down. You see it goes down slightly. I'll do it again. Okay, it's dropping. Okay, now 10 grams makes a force of about 0.1 newtons. So if I'm very careful, I can mark the new position of the elastic at 0.1. Okay, so I'm going to do it with my metal because I prefer this. Oh, there we go. So I'm going to now mark the new position.
And just to jump in with a couple of suggestions for people who still don't know what kind of masses to calibrate. If you do have a kitchen balance, like I've brought my kitchen balance out so I could weigh the mass of a large number of things, like screws in Mr. Thompson's case. Or if you're feeling rich and you have a lot of coins around, so I have a whole bunch of coins on my table, you can see here. And in case it's of use, I'll put a link in the chat to a list of the masses of coins in Europe and in Turkey. I think that's the only two places a lot of you guys are from here. So there's a link in the chat now to the Wikipedia article on specifications for Euro coins. And here's the Turkey coins. And so in my case, I know that I'm in Europe and a €1 coin weighs, I think, 7.2 grams. And then I could combine that with two 2-cent coins, which are 1.67 each. And that'll get me quite close to 10 grams. So that'll be my 1 Newton mark. A euro and 2 cents in my case.
Yeah, that's a way of doing it, definitely. I quite like the idea of going up in regular amounts to have a regular difference on my scale here. But you'll see it's not perfectly linear. It doesn't go up in a very, very, very regular way. There's actually a slight difference between the spaces when you use the same masses each time. Anyway, we have one screw in the basket, and you have probably 1 coin in the bag, or maybe 1 sugar lump in the bag. And you can probably see the mark has moved down, and I've marked it 0.1 newtons. Okay. So the next step, you guessed it, 2. Okay, when you add the second one, hopefully it will change position and you can mark the new position, 0.2. That's what I'm doing now, 0.2. Okay. Now we don't have time to do every one up to 10, or at least I don't, so I'm going to put 2 in this time. 2 and 2 is 4, okay. And you can see that the Newtonmeter is really moving noticeably downwards, okay. So now I'm going to mark 0.4. Okay, I'm going to add another 2. Up. You can see it's changed position again. That's 0.6. Okay. Just one point about elastic bands. They don't like sunlight and they don't like city air. Now I live in the city here, and over a month the elastic's going to be attacked by the pollution in the air. There's not a lot of pollution at the moment, as everybody knows, because traffic is much less than normal. But if in a normal period, the ozone in the air attacks the elastic. So I recommend you keep your Newtonmeter in a plastic bag, closed, so that there's no air can get in. and that way it will last much longer. Okay, and this is generally true of things made of rubber. Okay, so I now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in there, 6. So I'm going to mark 6 on here, which is done, and I'll put 2 more. 0.8. How are you going, Mr. G? Are you progressing?
Yeah, I'm up to 0.6 newtons. And I'm finding some interesting combinations of coins, like 30 cents weighs nearly 0.1 newtons. So does 51. So it's really interesting finding these combinations of coins that have the same mass. I wouldn't have thought of that before.
Okay, so as you can see, by the time I get near the bottom of my paper, I'm up to, I don't know if you can see that actually. It's up. Yeah, I'm up to 0.1 newtons, which is 100 grams, or 0.1 kilograms. Okay, I think I can get probably another 1 or 2, and then that's going to be all. I want to check actually that my 0 stays 0, so I'm going to just take the thing off and see if it goes back to 0. It's I don't know if you can see. Yeah, it's gone back to 0. Okay, check yours is going back to 0, or you might want to restart, because if it's not going back to 0, it's because you didn't pull the elastic at the beginning like I suggested enough. Okay, because the knots are still getting tight. But if the knots are tight, then it should go back to 0. Check it's going back to 0. If it's not going back to 0, you can recalibrate later. The important thing now is to understand how to calibrate. So I don't know if you can see that, Mr. G. My calibrations of 2 grams to 20 gram masses is quite linear.
Yeah, and that's better than mine. I would have expected it to be linear. But mine is less linear than I was hoping for.
Is it going back to 0?
No. Well, almost.
Yeah. I think it might depend on the elastic you use. But this one is pretty linear over this range. It's quite interesting.
And mine are quite old. As Mr. T was saying, sunlight and city air isn't good for elastic bands. I haven't left mine out in the sunlight. I haven't been careless enough for that. But living in Paris, now I've had these elastics for maybe 2 years, a year and a half. And some of them are kind of old and they break fairly easily. So I wouldn't be surprised if my elastics aren't the best ones to be using for this.
So should we ask for some thumbs up? See how things are going?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Different stages. Who's got so far, and who's got the Newtonmeter made, for example?
Okay, yeah.
Without the scale.
Let's check again whether or not you have it calibrated. Who has it made up to this point at least, or calibrated? Either give your thumbs up or turn your camera on to show us how far you've gotten. Okay, so we have at least 2 or 3 like that. Okay, a couple more. That's looking good. And if you've gotten to the point where it's calibrated, even if the calibration isn't perfect, like mine didn't go quite back to 0, so I've got a little bit of work on this before it's ready for Friday's session, where we'll be measuring the coefficient of friction. But it's almost ready, and I've kind of understood the rest of what I needed to do. If you've gotten to this point following along, can you give a thumbs up or turn your camera on and show it?
You've done very well if you've got to this point, because it's not so easy to do all of this in one session.
Okay, and it looks like we lost a couple of you there. So the putting it together seemed to have been good enough for most of you, but the calibration, that's a little bit trickier. Don't worry if you didn't get it all the way done, but I'm going to request to everyone, even if you didn't have the materials for this time, if you're joining on Friday, it'd be good if we get as many results as possible. So it would be good if you try between now and then to put it together so you're ready to participate more fully on Friday. So like I mentioned, this is being recorded so that I'll post parts of this at least on my YouTube channel so that you can check it out and you can follow along in case you didn't have the chance to ask questions or you weren't doing it live for this. so that you will be able to get things ready and have a functioning Newtonmeter for Friday. And I'm glad we managed to get through the calibration. I think we'll probably leave it till Friday to talk about how we'll use it for the experiment, unless you wanted to really quickly introduce things, Mr. T.
Well, I think the students probably, if they've got the Newtonmeter made, they can experiment a little bit by putting objects on. Of course, this works backwards. So you can put an object on and work out how heavy it is without using a balance. Yeah, this is now, it can work as a balance, right, Mr. G?
Exactly, yeah. And for most physics purposes, we'd end up talking about the weight of something in newtons and the mass in kilograms. Even though in day-to-day terms, you'd probably refer to the mass in kilograms as a weight. From a physics point of view, that's not spot on. And so looking at it in terms of forces in newtons, that becomes useful when we're looking at forces and how objects end up moving. So it's kind of a lead in to what we'll be doing Friday.
Yeah, so I could take these scissors, I could hang them on, and I could, I don't know, it says about 0.5 here, no, 0.5. So that would be 50 grams, right?
Yeah, 50 grams would be half of a newton. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I weighed my scissors with my Newtonmeter.
Perfect. And other things to try between now and Friday, if you wanted to try dragging things across surfaces, we'll be going through that in a lot more detail on Friday in terms of our experimental protocol. But play around with this in the meantime and have fun exploring forces. So our next session with Mr. T, because this is part of a two-part session, is Friday at 11 o'clock. I hope to see all of you there, and I hope that you have Newtonmeters ready to show off for that. Do you have any last things to say before we say goodbye?
My only point, just an interesting idea came into my mind. If you make two of these and pull one against the other, they should read the same, right?
They should, and that'd be a good check of the calibration for both.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so we'll wrap things up there. I want to thank everyone for joining us again, especially thanks to Mr. T for joining for this guest session. And I want to encourage everyone to stay curious, stay safe, stay home, and thanks for joining in this adventure.